In accordance with the rules of procedure, the second reading debate is adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Rural Representative Election Amendment Bill 2022. The Honourable Kenneth Lau, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the committee's report. The Honourable Kenneth Lau. Madam Deputy, as the Chairman of the Bills Committee on Rural Representative Election Amendment Bill 2022, I would like to report the deliberations of the Bills Committee. The bill seeks to introduce a requirement for persons elected as rural representatives RRs to sign a written oath to uphold the basic law and bear allegiance to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, Hong Kong SAR, before holding office. The bill also includes amendments relating to the inspection of omissions list OL and interpretation of election advertisements to align with the arrangements for other public elections. The Bills Committee supports the bill. However, some members considered that the current proposal that RRs elect would only be required to sign and submit a written oath before assuming office is not sufficient to reflect the solemnity of oath-taking. These members proposed that the administration should consider replacing the proposed arrangement, that is, by an oral oath arrangement, that is, to read out the oath before an oath administrator, in line with the oath-taking arrangements for District Council DC and Legislative Council LegCo members. These members further pointed out that RRs have avenues to become members of DCs and LegCo. As such, in order to implement the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong, they considered that the candidates of RR elections should also be subject to the eligibility assessment and validation of the Candidate Eligibility Review Committee, CERC. The administration explained that pursuant to the decision on improving the electoral system of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, made by the National People's Congress last March, as well as Annexes 1 and 2 to the Basic Law, the CERC of Hong Kong SAR, responsible for reviewing and confirming the qualifications of candidates for election committee members, CE and LegCo members, has been established. RR elections, however, are not included. The administration further explained that after reviewing the oath-taking arrangements for LegCo, DC, and EC members and taking into account the number of RRs, the administration considered that the EC model, whereby a written oath is required before assumption of office, better suits the case for RRs in that it would be more efficient operationally. The administration stressed that written oaths and oral oaths are the same in terms of solemnity and legal status. The administration further advised that to reflect the solemnity of the oath, the high integrity expected of an elected officer, and the gravity of being in breach of the public's trust by not observing oath duties, it is also proposed under the bill that a person would be disqualified from being nominated as a candidate at an RR election and from being elected as an RR if the date of the election is within 5 years after the person has vacated an RR office or been disqualified from entering on an office for declining or neglecting to take an oath, or has been in breach of the oath or failed to fulfill the legal requirements and conditions on upholding the basic law and bearing allegiance to Hong Kong SAR. The administration advised that the proposed arrangements are similar to those in other public elections. Some members asked about the measures in place to review and confirm the eligibility of persons standing for RR elections, as these candidates are not subject to the assessment and validation of CERC. The administration pointed out that according to Section 24 of the Rural Representative Election Ordinance, RREO, A person is not validly nominated as a candidate for the RR election unless the person makes a declaration in the nomination form to the effect that he or she will uphold the basic law and pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR. The returning officer, RO, will assess the validity of the declaration in accordance with the law and based on the relevant information. RO will determine whether the declaration made by the candidate in nomination form that he or she will uphold the basic law and pledge allegiance to Hong Kong SAR is genuine, thereby deciding whether the relevant nomination is valid. In response to members' concerns and suggestions mentioned above, the administration pointed to the urgent need to refine the arrangements for RR elections in the run-up to the next rural ordinary election in early 2023. The administration will not rule out conducting a review on the relevant arrangements in due course. Members also expressed concerns that there is no requirement for the EC model similar to that of Clause 8 of the bill, namely that a person elected as an RR would be regarded as declining or neglecting to take the RR oath if the Director of Home Affairs, DHA, does not receive the RR oath signed and returned by the person. Members inquired about the reason for proposing such difference in treatment between a person elected as an RR and a person elected as an EC member. The administration explained that to reflect the solemnity of the oath, the high integrity expected of an elected RR, and the gravity of being in breach of the public's trust by not observing the oath duties, it is the administration's policy intention to regard failure to duly sign and return the RR oath to DHA as declining or neglecting to take the RR oath and to impose legal consequences. That is, the RRs elect concerned will be disqualified from holding the office and from being nominated and elected as an RR in an RR election within 5 years. The requirement under Clause 8 of the bill as mentioned is therefore proposed. Noting that the bill seeks to restrict the inspection of OL to certain specified persons, such as a resident of an existing village or an indigenous inhabitant of an indigenous village, an inquiry has been raised on the means upon which a person's identity may be verified to see if the person meets the relevant requirements provided under the relevant provision. The administration explained that the terms resident of an existing village and indigenous inhabitant of an indigenous village are defined in REO, and the relevant registers of electors may provide reference on whether the person meets the relevant requirements. The administration pointed out that assistance may also be sought from rural committees and the Heung Yee Kok if necessary. Members noted that the administration will propose a minor textual amendment to the bill in response to the observation of the legal advisor of the Bills Committee and comments of members. The administration will also propose a technical amendment to the commencement arrangement. Members did not raise any objection to these amendments. President, that concludes my report on the work of the Bills Committee. I now turn to my personal views on the bill. First of all, I must declare that I am a representative of indigenous villages of Tuen Mun, Long Ku Tan village. I'm also the chairman of the Heung Yee Kok. For this Rural Representative Election Amendment Bill 22 is meant to improve the electoral system for rural representative election, and then candidates must sign an oath to uphold the basic law and pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR. If there are requirements, if such requirements are not met, members have expressed concern on two fronts. One, in the bill, there should be provision for eligibility assessment by the CRC and decide whether the nomination is valid. And then written oath should be replaced by oral oath, so as to align the arrangement with that for DC and electoral members. At the Bills Committee, the administration explained that in accordance with the annexes to the Basic Law, the setting of the CRC does not cover rural representative election, but it doesn't mean that rural representatives don't need to uphold the basic law or pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR. That's why in Section 24 of the RREO states that statutory declaration has to be signed by candidates to uphold basic law and pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR, and then the returning officer will assess whether the declaration is true and genuine, and then decide if the nomination is valid or not. Now, whether candidates receive a valid nomination, the returning officer has always been instrumental in ensuring that. It was the case with Leshko and DC election, and the returning officers have successfully disqualified certain candidates or nominees so that they could not join the council and obstruct its work. Now, for rural representative, they have to sign a written oath to uphold basic law and pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong South. And so at the point of nomination, we have returning officers monitoring the case, and after they're elected, they have to sign the oath. So this is a dual measure to ensure we implement the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. So it's in line with the intention of improving the electoral system. And then written oath, like oral oath, has the same legal effect. It's also solemn. The next rural representative ordinary election will be held early next year, so I hope this bill will be passed, and then the provisions could come into effect for the next election in early 2023. And then the government does not rule out the possibility of reviewing the arrangement in the future. It will continue to consider the views of members. So on that note, I support the passage of the bill, and I so submit.
Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you, Madam Deputy. First, I have to declare interest. I am a member of the Sha Tin Rural Committee. And the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong has been implemented. We should stay firm to the bottom line, and including the requirement that's set out in the RRE Amendment Bill. Now, the oath taker must be genuine and sincere in taking the oath. But if it is in the form of a written oath, I am afraid that we might not be able to gatekeep the exercise. And I also suggest that the Candidate Eligibility Review Committee be set up. Now, in the basic law, the RRs are not mentioned, but we must also do the same for RRs. The CERC has been discharging its function as a gatekeeper in other public elections, and it comprises members who are from the National Security Office. And the office has collected information on the candidates' acts and deeds before they decide on whether the nomination is a valid one. And this is one way of implementing patriots administering Hong Kong. And community leaders are also elected as members of the Rural Committee, and these Rural Committee members can later join the Hung Yee Kuk and the Lechko as well, ultimately. So if we can't do proper gatekeeping at the rural representative election, I'm afraid that we might not be able to safeguard the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. During the course of discussions at the Bills Committee, we know that the schedule is very tight. And Mr. Lau has said that the Bills Committee supports, in principle, the bill, but we hope that the government can plug the loopholes, and that is elections of various levels should be governed by the same principles, so that we can really faithfully implement the patriots administering Hong Kong principle. So I hope that the government can come up with a timetable and a roadmap on when you will review the bill. Mr. Vincent Zhang. Madam Deputy, first, I welcome the new Secretary for Home Affairs and Youth and best wishes for your work, and I hope that you can pay heed to our views to do the best work in implementing Home Affairs and Youth policies. I am a representative of DAB, and I support the REA Amendment Bill, and this is to improve the election so that the candidate before assuming office should declare that he upholds a basic law and swear allegiance to the HKSAR. If he doesn't do that, he will be disqualified and he should bear legal consequences. And this is in line with other public elections. And that will help in implementing the national security law and implementing the Patriots Administering Hong Kong principle. So I support that. But I must point out that the legislative proposals are not in line with elections in the district councils and LegCo. This is regrettable. The proposal is that the RR, before assuming office, has to sign and submit a written oath, and there is no need to take the oath orally, face to face. And people raise this query, why not? And the administration said at the Bills Committee that the written oaths and oral oaths are the same in terms of solemnity and legal status, and considering that the rural representatives number over 1,500, so we should adopt the EC model, and it would be operationally more efficient. But let's not forget that we have the CERC vetting the eligibility of the district council candidates, and after they've got elected, they should also take the oath. And before they get elected, the CERC is also playing a gatekeeping role. But for ours, they don't have to be vetted by the CERC. So the returning officer will decide on his own whether the nomination is valid, and the retaining officer will look at the background, the past acts and deeds of the candidate only. But is this kind of information sufficient? That is to be queried. And we remember vividly that before the improvement of the electoral system, at LegCo and DC elections, there were indeed incidents where returning officers were not properly gatekeeping. So I don't want that to happen in the RR elections in the future. And I hope that the administration can explain more. Since the RR candidates do not have to be vetted by the CERC, what other measures does the government have to make sure that the candidates are really patriots and they are really sincerely upholding the basic law and swear to allegiance to the SAR? The President Xi Jinping has mentioned 4 principles to uphold in his important speech. And one of the emphasis is that the governance power should be in the hands of those who love the country. And this principle should be adhered to steadfastly. And rural representatives are part of our establishment. And I think the election arrangement should be aligned with DC elections and LegCo elections. The next ordinary elections for RL will be held in early 2023. I know that you have a tight time schedule, and there's a pressing need for you to amend the legislation. You may not do everything at one go, but in any case, I support the amendment. And I hope that after the next election is held, you should learn lessons from your experience and conduct a review. And please also cover the RR candidates under your CERC so that we can implement the principle of Patriots Administering Hong Kong properly.
Mr. Chan Hock Fong. Thank you. Recently, there is a recent student who has just taken DSE to work as an intern in my office, and next week he will have a graduation ceremony, yet he is afraid that there wouldn't be a ceremony due to the pandemic, and he's afraid that he would only receive a certificate, and that would actually make him lose some of the precious memories of a graduation ceremony. But luckily, the ceremony could take place as usual. Why did I choose to share this story with you? It is because that for RR elect next year, they will only be required to take a written oath and not an oral oath. Although it is equally in terms of legal status, it is actually different in format because the government says that a written oath does not lack in solemnity. However, it is very different. The next rural representative election will be carried out in early 2023, and there is not enough time for the preparations. However, we hope that there would be a review very soon to ensure that there would also be an oral view. According to Article 19, for any electoral members and other and for principal officials, then when they assume office, they must swear to uphold the basic law and swear allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR of the People's Republic of China in accordance with the law. This time, the RR elect will be only taking a written oath. But then they can also use this channel to become a electoral officer or a Heung Yi Kok member. So this is also a public election as well. Therefore, there is the necessity to actually change this to oral oath taking as well. Well, the government says that for members, EC members, they do not need to take an oral oath as well. But I don't think you should make this comparison because in accordance with the law, then EC members must sign an oath and upholding the basic law and swearing allegiance to the HKSAR. And other than receiving the adequate number of nominations, it must also go through a review of the CRC before nominations are valid. Therefore, there is a gatekeeping threshold to ensure that the candidates are patriots. So this is actually implemented through the improving the election system amendment made. However, there is no such CERC qualification review for the RR election. Therefore, you should not just compare these two. There are actually over 1,500 seats for the RR election. Actually, you could actually have the oath taking in groups. It wouldn't take too much of a time. Actually, all public elections should be aligned in terms of arrangements to ensure that it's patriots administering Hong Kong and that it should be a fair election for all. I so submit. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Thank you. In the first quarter of 2023, we are going to see the latest rural representative election. I raise two concerns in the deliberation. First of all, on the arrangement of the oath-taking, and second, on the eligibility review of candidates. In relation to the first point, the law stipulates that RRs elect are required to sign and submit a written oath, uphold the basic law and swear allegiance to the HKSAR before assuming office. But there was a huge debate on why a written oath could be accepted and not an oral oath. Members all agree that an oral oath is more solemn and more appropriate. The administration's explanation is that there are too many people, over 1,500. Therefore, an example of EC members also signing a written oath as similar arrangement, and that it would be more efficient to require a written oath instead. I agree that it is totally equally binding in terms of legal status. However, if there is an oath-taking ceremony, it would be much better. In reviewing and scrutinizing the bill, I also noticed that after signing the written oath, it must be returned to DHA. Any RR elect who does not return it on time will be disqualified from holding office as an RR. So, what is deemed as having returned to the Director of Home Affairs, I see that there are actually two ways in which you could return it. First, by hand, or second, if you are, or you can actually return it in person. By mail is not accepted. But how can it ensure that it could meet these requirements? I agree with what other members said. Without the qualification review of a CERC is somewhat of an issue, because the current system will actually be a decision made by the returning officer. We have actually adopted this method for a very long period of time, yet it has proven not to be perfect, that there are loopholes. If the system is already perfect, then the central government will not need to introduce the CERC. Given the election will be carried out in early 2023, time is really tight. I call upon the government to review this arrangement at an appropriate time after the election next year. Although the RR elections is not an election listed under the Basic Law, however, we have to ensure patriots to assume position. Therefore, we should use the same yardstick for all elections. I hope after the review, the government will agree that RR election is the same as other elections and should also see a review and validation of the CERC to ensure the electoral system is comprehensive and that it could continue.
Ms. Nissi Lam, one of the proposals is that the RR elect, including the village representatives, before they assume office, they should sign a written oath. That can help effectively implement the principle of patrons administering Hong Kong. So I think we should standardize the oath-taking requirements, and the number of RR elect being too big should not be an excuse for you not to implement an oral oath. The RR will become members of the rural committees or members of Hung Yi Kong's, EC members and electrical members. And since they can actually join the political establishment in Hong Kong, so the government must gatekeep properly. It should make sure that our elects are genuinely loving country in Hong Kong. And the principle of Patriots administering Hong Kong forms a cornerstone of our policy governance. So we should align the requirements for all types of public elections. The government said that the NPCSE decision and the Article 104 in Basic Law have not mentioned RR, and then the RR elects are not required to take an oral oath. But if that is the case, how can you make sure that they are swearing the oath with a genuine heart? President Xi Jinping said that patriots, our governance power should be in the hands of the patriots. This is a requirement if we really want to have long-term stability and prosperity. And the SAR government must standardize all requirements on public elections.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs to reply. Then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. President, first of all, I thank the Chairman of the Bills Committee on Rural Representative Election Amendment Bill 2022, Mr. Lau Yip-Keung, and all members for deliberating and scrutinizing the bill in such detail and speed so as to allow the resumption of the second reading today. The administration has responded to each and every comment of the BC and raised some technical amendments. With the support of members of the BC, I will move the amendments at the committee stage. The bill seeks to improve the rural representative election by introducing the requirement for an RR elect to take oath to uphold the basic law and bear allegiance to HKSAR before holding office to align with the arrangements for other public elections. Currently, with the exception of rural representative election, for all other public elections monitored by the EAC, including the Legislative Council, Election Committee, and District Council, the candidate-elect must take oath when assuming office in accordance with the law. After considering the NSL stipulations and arrangements for other public elections and the nature of the rural representative election, we propose to introduce the requirement for an RR elect to sign a written oath before assuming office and return it to the Director of Home Affairs. To reflect the solemnity of oath-taking, high integrity expected of an RR elect, and the gravity of being in breach of the public's trust by not observing the oath duties, we also propose that any RR elect who fails to comply with the statutory oath-taking requirement should be disqualified from holding office and bear the legal consequences, such as being banned from an RR election and other public elections within 5 years. Other than the above-mentioned requirements, we also propose 3 technical amendments to align the RR election with other public election arrangements. The 3 amendments are: first, limit the inspection of omissions list published for the purpose of an RR election to specified persons only. Second, extend the interpretation of election advertisement. And third, rectify the names of 3 rural committees as appeared in RREO and the District Council's ordinance. Members in general supported the above proposals at the Bills Committee stage. We also heard other views at the BC meeting, which I hope to respond here, including the assessment and validation of the candidates. Some members believe that to regard failure to duly sign and return the RR oath to DHA as declining or neglecting to take the RR oath, and we have explained this in the Bills Committee. The Standing Committee on March 30th of 2021, after amending, said that a candidate qualification review committee is responsible for reviewing and confirming the qualifications of candidates for EC members, senior and electoral members. Therefore, this has clearly stated the functions of the CRC, yet this does not include confirming the qualification of a RR-elect. We understand that RRs may become members of Heung Yi-kuk, DC, and LegCo members. Even though the bill did not raise amendments on the functions of the CRC and the eligibility review of the RR-elects, in accordance with Article 24 of the RREO, a person is not validly nominated as a candidate for the RR election unless the person makes a declaration in the nomination form to the effect that he or she will uphold the basic law and pledge allegiance to the HKSAR. The returning officer will assess the validity of the declaration and determine whether the declaration made by the candidate in the nomination form that she or he will uphold the basic law and determine whether this nomination is valid. There are also members that of the view that the oath-taking should be the same as with other elections and that the oath-taking should be an oral one. I have to reiterate that both written and oral oaths are the same in terms of legal status. As currently, there are over 1,500 RR seats, similar to the number of EC members. Therefore, we believe that adopting the EC model to require an elect to return a written oath before assuming office will be more efficient and suitable for the RR elections. Of course, I understand that then there will not be a sort of like an oath-taking ceremony as stated by Mr. Chan Hock-fong, but it is same in terms of legal status. 6 members have given their views just now, and we have heard similar views that a written oath would not be solemn enough and that the CRC should act as gatekeeping. Mr. Lee also mentioned the elections within the REO, but actually it is under the standards of the RREO, and it is not an election under the basic law. We are now looking into the amendments of that, and this arrangement will also be made the same for the other rural committees. How can we implement patriots administering Hong Kong in the RR election? Members are of the same view as our views. The amendment is to align this election with all other public elections to have patriots administering Hong Kong. We hope that the RR election will continue to meet what is said by President Xi on July 1st, that we must ensure patriots administering Hong Kong and that this principle must be upheld in the RR election. Therefore, we are going to implement this principle in the RR election and other public elections. We are going to consider all the views given. The next rural election will be held next January. Therefore, I call for members to support the passage of the bill so that we can begin our preparation work for the election successfully. I also thank Mr. Chang. I am here in my capacity as an official for the first time, although I'm not unfamiliar with this room. I hope that no matter which position or post I'm in, I'll be able to work with all of you to ensure the development of Hong Kong. We all work towards the same goal to ensure that we can uphold the patriots administering Hong Kong principle so that everyone can be able to enjoy life in a safe manner. I so submit.
We now put the question to you that the Rural Representative Election Amendment Bill 2022 be read the second time. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Rural Representative Election Amendment Bill 2022. This council now becomes Committee of the Whole Council to